Learning as Chutz Shlema Filan Chaya Baserach. We're on Daf Samach Vav Amud Beis. We brought a whole list of different Amoraim who bolster our Mishnah that said that Nois and Tam Gam is mutter. Nesinis Tam, when something imparts a taste, something of Isser imparts a Usser taste, the heter, if the taste is not beneficial, if it's hurting the thing that it's going into, it doesn't asa, because all it is taste, which is important to remember. We're not talking about actual issa, we're talking about just the tam of issa. So, am I in the right place? No, I think I'm in the wrong place.
We're up to Mechlal de Iklam the Amination Talmud Gam Aser.
Where is this? On Samach Vav on the base?
Samach Zayin.
Samach Zayin, that's why I'm in the wrong place. Yeah, on Samach Vav on the base. So on Samach Zayin on the base, correct. So Amar Ravuna with him not Amle Aban. No. Mechlal, that's what we're up to. Mechlal the Iklam and Amanoisin Tamlif Gam Aser. And the fact that we have to make all these listings of Manda Amrim who say the same thing that our Mishnah said. Our Mishnah already said Noisin Tamlif Gam is mutter. The fact that we're trying to bring so many people who say the same thing, Amoraim that say the same thing, must be some Tana who disagrees and says even if it's Noisin Tamlif Gam, it's still Aser. In Gemara says yes, there is. Tanya, and this is the Bryce. Echad Noisin Tamlif Gam, but Echad Noisin Tamlif Shvach Aser. Divrei Remei. Remei says not only is a Noisin Tam L'Shvach Aser, even a Noisin Tam L'Gam is also Aser. So this is the Manda Amar who says that Noisin Tam L'Gam is going to be Aser. Rav Shimon Omer L'Shvach Aser L'Gam Mutter. Rav Shimon says like what we've been saying till now, like our Mishnah. Good morning. We're on Samach Zayin on the base. Shimon says L'Shvach is Aser, but L'Gam is mutter, like our Mishnah says, like we've been learning until now. So my time of the Rameya. Why does Rameya say when something gives a tam and the tam is not benefiting what it's going into, that even so, if it's aser, that tam has a status to aser what it went into? He says, Gama Miguli Avdikecham. We learn it out from the din that the Torah says that after the Yidden conquered the Minyanim, after the Milchama, and they took their Kalim, the Torah instructs the Yidden to clean out, to purge the Kalim of the Midyanim. As we all know, if it was cooked with fire, you have to burn out what was inside of it. It was boiled inside of it, and you have to use water to get it out. So now all that was in the kalim of the midyanim was a tam from when they cooked in it. We're talking about, you don't need gil, you don't need to burn out for the actual isser. Whatever ham was on it, they cleaned off. You could rinse that off, but it was for the tam that was absorbed into the walls. And l'chayr, that tam is not going to benefit whatever you're cooking. It's going to be l'fgam. So you see that nois and tam l'fgam is also aser. And that,
why would it be l'fgam? We don't know. I mean, maybe ham.
The Gemara is not being entirely clear, as we're going to say in a second. Depends if it's more than a ben yaimai. The assumption is anything that's more than a ben yaimai, more than 24 hours, is going to be paigum. It's not going to be impart a beneficial taste. So this would be the support for a mayor, where we see that even a taste of pagam is also. The Idach and Rav Shimon who says it's mutter. Could Rav Huna Breder V'chia, the Amar Rav Huna Breder V'chia, the esoteric there bas yuma, the loy lifkum, the loy lifkum who, the loy lifkam who. He says that no, the whole purpose of the Torah, when the Torah said that you have to clean out, you have to scour and burn out the tam from the kalim of the minyanim, that's only kalim that were within 24 hours of being used by the minyanim. So that's where the Torah says you have to burn it out because that's still a beneficial tam. But ein hanami, if it was more than 24 hours, it would be awesome. So of course it occurs to me, probably to you as well. So why don't you just wait till after 24 hours and then they won't need to clean it out. But I'm pretty sure that there's a rule that that you can't be mevatel issa lechatchila. So if you're waiting, then you're trying to be mevatel it. And I don't know if that applies to the din of making it pogum, but I assume that would have to be the explanation of why you can't do this strategy. So in any case,
Unless it was just that they wouldn't know. Like they don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's a way to actually detect if something was used that day or not.
so you're saying that, no, so what are you saying? Are you agreeing with me or disagreeing?
No, I'm saying the reason why they had to do it is, in other words,
Why don't they just wait till after 24 hours? Then it's for sure all more than 24.
oh, yes.
So I'm saying maybe that's mevatel lechatchila.
That would make sense.
I feel like I remember hearing something about it. It could be that the Yidden had to do something with those kalim. They didn't have the option of waiting for some reason. Right? They hadn't cooked until then. I remember something like this. It's a Gemara somewhere. So in any case, that's the explanation for Reb Meir, who says that's the explanation of Rav Shimon, who says that l'shvach is also l'fgam is mutter, but over here it wasn't l'fgam. That's the reason why they had to clean it out. The idach and Rav Meir, kader bas yuma nami efshalei pagma porta. Rav Meir holds no, even bas yuma, he says there is some slight pagam in it, and nevertheless the Torah says you have to do it. Even within 24 hours, and the Torah says you have to do it. So Vice Dice, he says that means that even something that's nice and tam l'fgam is also, and that's why the Torah told you to purge them, to kasher the kalim. Rav Shimon, my time, the Torah said you have to clean out these kalim. You're trying to suggest that it's not pogum. Well, it means you're saying it's talking about where you ate it. They used it for that day. That seems l'chayra, a forced explanation. Why should you say that it's only talking about where they wanted to use it the same day and it's within 24 hours of it being cooked? Why doesn't the Taka say like Rameh? So Zaktumar, he has his own support. The Tanya. The Torah says you shouldn't eat an nevela. It should only go to the ger, meaning not the ger, not mamish a ger who's magayer, but a ger, a stranger who's living amongst you, meaning a guy. You give it to a guy. Kol haruya leger kruya nevela. She'en real ger ain't a kruya nevela. The only thing that has a din nevela that it's usher to eat is something that someone can eat. That a ger, someone who's a non-Jew, could eat it. But something that they themselves also, that a non-Jew also wouldn't eat because it's not edible, then it doesn't have a din nevela. So it's the Rishonim ask, and I think it seems like it's an obvious question. We're talking about something, so we want to say that this is I'm sorry, I skipped ahead to the question before I said what the raya is. The raya is, you see over there, that something that's pogum, that's unable to be eaten, does not have a din that it's also. Just like we see that in a vela, that doesn't have a beneficial taste, that's not capable of being eaten, is going to be mutter. So too, an eisen tam lefgam is also going to be mutter. But the question is, they're two separate things. This is why I was jumping to the question, because it's such an obvious question. We're talking over there about something that's not capable of being eaten. We're not talking about something that has a bad taste. We're talking about something that's entirely inedible. How does that compare to something that's still edible, but it gave a bad taste? And the answer is,
so the nevela is not edible?
we're saying that if a nevela were not to be edible, it would not have the Isser nevela. That's what we learn out. The pasuk says you should feed the nevela to the non-Jew, meaning
Yeah.
only if a non-Jew would eat it does it have a din nevela. It's you're going to be chayiv. You're going to get karos for eating it or malchus for eating it. But if it's inedible, then it doesn't have that din. But how could you compare something being inedible to something giving a nice and tam that just makes it a little bit worse, but it's still edible? And the answer is, over there we're talking about eating the actual nevela. So a nevela that's inedible is equivalent to a flavor, a tam, that is detrimental, because all the flavor is a flavor. It's just adding a taste. If the taste is detrimental, then it's doing nothing. So it's similar to a nevela that's also, if it's inedible, it's not providing anything. A person can't eat it, they don't get anything out of it. So too, a flavor, a tam that is bad, you're not getting anything out of it. It's just hurting instead of helping. That's what the Rishonim say. That would be Rav Shimon's Tushtel, and that would be his raya that nois and tam lefgam is us.
Is mutter.
Is mutter, right? So for a mayor, ahu lemute srucha meikara. Remeir says no. That pasuk is not coming to tell you that if you have an avela that it deteriorated, it got spoiled, and it's no longer fit for human consumption, which would be similar to nois and tam lefgam. This is talking about something that from the beginning it had some kind of disease, and it wasn't edible from the time that it died. And it's coming to tell you that it was never, since this was never able to be eaten, it's not a din of its current state. It's a din based on the fact that it was never really an avela. From the time that it died, it was inedible. Something that was never edible is not even an avela. It's afra ba'alma. Like he says, that's something that never rose to the state of being food. So it's mamish offer. So we don't need a pasuk to tell you that is not going to be an avela. So that was So this is the first shita. This is going to be the shita of Rabbi Yochanan. Like we're going to see that the machlekes between Rav Meir and Rav Shimon is whether something that's nice and tam lefgam is mutter or not. Rav Shimon holds, like we've been saying till now, that nice and tam lefgam is mutter, and Rav Meir says no. In spite of the fact that it's lefgam, we learn out from Giulei Avik Techavim from Midyan that even a nice and tam lefgam is also awesome. Amar Ula. Ula says no. He reverts back. He says that this is not what the machlek is. Machlek is sheshbiach l'pseif pagam. Einachanami. Our Mishnah is universal. Our Mishnah that says nice and tam lefgam is mutter is correct. But our question is, when a case where at the beginning when the flavor was added, it was mashbiach, but then later on it changed to be pagam. That's where Rav Meir says it's awesome. Everyone agrees, like the pashtus, that nice and tam lefgam is mutter. Rav Chag asked Ula, yain shenafel l'toich hadoshim, b'chaymes shenafel l'toich grisin. The Brisa says wine of Isser, or yain nesach, that fell onto beans, or vinegar that fell onto the grisin, which is another type of legume, like a mushav, a kind of bean dish. Both of them are awesome. And the Chayra, this is the Tanakama, is Rav Meir, who's saying it's awesome. Rav Shimon Mate. Rav Shimon says it's mutter. There's no mention over here. The wine in the Adashim, or the Chaimitz in the grisim, the Chayra, are talking about where it's pagan from the beginning. And nevertheless, Rav Meir is saying that it's going to be aser. So you see, he says Noisin Tam Lefgam is also even where it wasn't mashpiach at the beginning. Well, Amar Ula. So Ula said back to him, Chagaloi Medi Yadem Aika Armi. Rabbanon Tiyufta Kamaisev. You don't understand that price. You're not even understanding what the meaning of that price is, and you're going to ask a kasha from it. It's presumptuous of you. Hacha b'mayaskinan. What is the case over here? This is like we've had this before. That grisim have two states. There's two ways to make grisim. Two ways to make legumes with wine or chaimitz. If you make it cold, it's like a good bean salad that tastes good. But if you then heat it up, you try to make a bean porridge, then it's not tasty to have it with vinegar. So what's the case? It fell let's say the vinegar fell into cold grisen, so that at that point it was a tasty bean salad. Then you warmed up the bean salad. So when you warm it up, it becomes a pagam, the taste of the pagam. So that's mashpiach l'pseif pagam, and that's where Rameir said it's also. But Einach Hanami Rameir would agree that, according to Ula, that if it was pagam from the beginning, it would be mutter. Rav Yochanan disagrees with Ula. He says no. He says like we had said before that Einach Hanami, that Rameir is really he has a full-fledged shita that he disagrees when Noisin Tam Lefgam is mutter. So he disagrees with Ula. So we have Ula says it's only the machlek. Everyone would agree Noisin Tam Lefgam is mutter. The machlekes is only where it was at first beneficial and then pagam. And Rav Yochanan says no. The Rameir is taka saying there's no such thing as Noisin Tam Lefgam is mutter. It's really yasser. Ibayalu. Track the Gemara. The pagam mi kara machlekes avol shviach say pagam divrei akal aser. According to Rabbi Yochanan, we're saying Rameir holds where it's pagam mi kara. Rameir says it's mutter, and I'm sorry, Rameir says it's aser, and Rav Shimon says it's mutter. What would be avol shviach say pagam divrei akal aser? And then if it was mashpiach at the beginning, even Rav Shimon would be maskim that it's going to be aser. Maybe Rav Shimon would argue. Rav Shimon would argue on Rav Meir in the case, not just in the case of pagam mitchila, but even by the case where it was pagam after it was mashpiach. Maybe Rav Shimon would say, since at the end it was pagam, it's going to be mutter, or is he maskim in that case to Rav Meir? And when it says take, we don't know if we say that the machlekes is actually about whether pagam is also or not. It's not clear what Rav Shimon would say if it was a mashpiach and afterwards pagam. Amar Rav Amram. He says, how could this be? We have our mission over here that says Noisin Tam Lefgam is mutter. And now we're saying, according to Rabbi Yochanan, that Rameir fully disagrees with this. He says Noisin Tam Lefgam is still awesome. How could it not be said in the Mishnah, the Shita of Rameir? Doesn't make sense. We have all these brises. We have brises, but we want a Mishnah. You can't say just one Shita of the Mishnah and not say the other. Nafik dak v'ashkach. So he went out to find a Mishnah. If a starter, a sa'ir is we use yeast to make our bread rise, but in the old days they used to use a starter dough. They would take some wheat, and I don't know exactly what you do with it. I'm sure my daughter would be able to explain it to me. But you somehow do something with it. You leave it out on the counter for 2 months, and it turns magically into starter. So if you have a sa'ir shel chulin, you have a little bit of starter dough, sa'ir of chulin, shenavel otaycha isa, fell into the dough, v'yesh ba kadei lahachmetz, and there's sufficient starter, there's sufficient sa'ir to cause the dough to rise. V'chmitza, and it rose. V'achach nafel sa'ir shel truma, after it already rose, you have a full-fledged challah ready to bake, a more sa'ar fell into it. So what happens when more sa'ar falls into it? It at that point becomes it turns the whole thing into sour. It becomes too much chametz. It gets over sa'ared. Oy sa'ar shel klai kerem. So it was either truma, which would aser it to kehanim, or it was klai kerem, which makes it aser enough for everyone. V'yesh ba kedei lahachametz. And this second bit of sa'ar of iser, all on its own had enough to be machmetz the dough. Aser. The Tanna Kama says it's going to be aser, even though at the time that it came in, l'chayre, it was paigamit. It was making you had a nice dough that was already rose because of the chametz, the sa'ar of heter, and then afterwards the sa'ar of iser came in after it was already. All it was doing was damaging it because it was already rising. You add more yeast after something's risen, and you over-rise it, it makes it bad. So you see, this is Rav Meir who's saying that nois and tam lifgam is also. Rav Shimon Mata, v'hacha de pagam ikarahu upligi. This is the case where from the beginning was pagam, and nevertheless Rav Meir is saying that it's also. So you see, this is a Mishnah, not like our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said nois and tam lifgam is mutter. We see over here that according to Rav Meir, it's also. Amar Rav Zera says no. It's not necessarily the case. Although the taste gets worse when you put in too much sa'ar, but what you've done is you created a new starter. So this dough, although its taste got worse, its utility got better because now it became roi to be used. You could divide it up into 100 pieces and use it, this whole dough, to start other chals. So it became more valuable. So it's not just the pagam, it's also a advantage, it's a shvach, and that's the reason why Rameya would ask. So that would be how Ula would explain that Mishnah. He'd say that it's not Rameya being chaylik on, he's not saying that there's a din of nois and tam lefgam is aser, he's just saying over there it's not lefgam. Tashma. Now we're going to try to bring now. So I believe we've given up on our attempt, or at least I guess Ula would say. I'm sorry, not Ula. Yochanan would say that was his raya. He'll still hold of his raya from that Mishnah, but now we'll just bring other brises to support this. The shita that Rameya holds nois and tam lefgam is aser. Tashma, sa'ar shel truma v'shel chulin, shenachlu toicha isa. If you have a sa'ar of truma, one of sa'ar of truma and one of chulin, and they fell into a dough, so when it falls into the dough, they fell in together. So that causes eventually that the dough is going to rise, and then it's going to overrise because it has too much sa'ar in it. And each one has sufficient to be chaymitz. So together between the two of them, it's gonna be chaymitz it too much. The chadzai, and it made it into chametz, awesome. Even so, it's awesome. Rav Shimon mater, and Rav Shimon says it's mutter. Nafel shel truma tchila. So the brisa continues. If first the iser fell in, which had enough to be chaymitz it, divrei hakol aser. In that case, even either of Shimon would say that at that point it wasn't nois and tam lefgam. There was no pgam from the truma. It was just being chaymitz the bread. It's making it good. Nafol shel chulin. If first the chulin fell in, v'achach nafol shel truma, oy shel klai hakerem, which is really the case of the Mishnah that we had before. Aser. Rav Shimon Mata. The Brisa says it will be Aser, and the Rav Shimon Mata. V'hacha the pagam yikaru pli. Again, this is at the beginning, as soon as it came in, it's already over leavening it. So we have it's really the same raya like we had from the Mishnah. So the Gemara says, why don't we answer the same as we answered before? That it's ultimately a benefit, that it's going to make a lot of chaymitz, a lot of sa'ar. Tashma miseifa. But there's another, the brisa continues, and from the seifa of the brisa, it's clear that we're not talking about that it's not considered to be a maila. Hayayin shenavel l'toich hadoshim, b'chaymitz shenavel l'toich grisin. If you have wine that fell into the beans and vinegar that fell into the grease, in which we quoted this brisa before, also Rav Shimon Mata. Then in that case, the Ramey is going to say it's aser, and Rav Shimon is mater because it's a nice tam lifkam. V'hachanami de pagami kara upligi. This is also a case where it was pagamei kara, and nevertheless they're arguing. And if you'll say, no, we already addressed this brisa, and we had explained that it's talking about where it first was cold, so it was mashbiach at the beginning. Why you bring a raya from here that Remeir is chaylik even when it was pagam metchila? Maybe it's talking about, like we said before, where it was at the beginning cold, so it was mashbiach at the beginning, and that's the reason why Remeir says it's aser. But we already said that if the truma came first, everyone says it's aser. That means in the mitzias of the brisa, we said that if the truma came first, then Reb Shimon says it's aser. So
both cases cannot be a case. We don't want to have it that the Reisha and the Seif are the same case. So if the Reisha is a case where it was first Mashbiach and then Pagam,
right,
so obviously the Seif has to be a case where it's Pagam Mitchila. And not like Ula or Rabbi Chaga, that it was first cold and then hot.
Yeah, I think that's what it's saying. Can you say that being chaylak when it first? This is the part that I was a little not clear about. Can we say that we if the truma came in first, we said that if the truma went in first and then later on, so at the beginning it was pagam, it was mashbiach, and then later on it became pagam, everyone says it's aser. So don't tell me that the case of the Adoshim is talking about where it was. It's not that it's unnecessary. It's Saisa that was saying that if it was Hishbiach ulbsaif pagam, right, where Truma came in first, but eventually we added in extra. You added in also Shalchulin, that even though at the end it's going to cause a pagam, the fact that it's still going to be also because at the beginning it was mashbiach. So you see that even if it's mashbiach, even if it comes to a pagam at the end, even Rav Shimon would be maskim that it's also.
It's interesting. Why don't we bring, so according to this brisa,
we could have answered that earlier question.
Yes.
The takeover, what we ended in the takeover. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they say that the Gemara really could have answered that question from here.
And so it's also initially because of Truma.
Well, not also, but it's also for it's restricted to Kohanim.
Right. It's restricted to Kohanim. So, but that's nothing to do with Nois and Talmud Pagam.
No, what we're talking about chaymitz. We're talking about a little bit of sourdough fell in.
Right.
So it was enough to be machmitz the flour, but then also additional chaymitz went in, additional sa'ar went in.
Right.
And at that point, it's paigam, because then it's too much. So it was hishbiach l'b'seif pagam.
So the initial issue was because of Truma, not because of something fell in. So that would make it.
No. What we're talking about is the chaymitz, the sa'ar that's making this dough rise. So that's giving a tam to the dough. We're saying they're equivalent, and that sa'ar let's say it's klaya karim instead of truma. That will make it simpler. So klaya karim is also. So you put klaya karim in, and at this point, it's very helpful to the dough. It's causing the dough to rise, and it's make this klaya karim is clearly adding in a good tam to this 100 times the size of a dough, so it will asa the dough. The whole dough will become klai karim, which is asa bahana. But then what happened is you added more sa'ar, more starter, and that caused the dough, instead of to be an edible dough, now it ruins the taste of it. It becomes inedible because it has too much starter. So it's a nois and tam. At the beginning, it's nois and tam l'shvach, but at the end, the starter of klaya karim together with the starter of chulin, of regular of kosher starter, made it into pagam. They jointly, the taste that they both gave together caused damage. And generally, when something is nice and tam lefgam, it's not us. So that's our question. When something originally at the beginning was beneficial, and then it becomes at the end a detriment, does it have a din of nice and tam lefgam, which is mutter according to Rabbi Yochanan? So, I mean, according to Rabbi Yochanan, Shimon holds that it's mutter.
The truma is really not really relevant here. Or I just haven't seen how the fact that it's truma is relevant.
Well, I'm saying truma means that it's answering it to kahanim. So the question is, is this considered to be giving a real tam, a beneficial tam, which would answer it to kahanim? You first added truma, right? You add a little bit of sa'ar of truma. So if that is considered to be a beneficial tam, then it makes the whole thing truma. If it's considered the tam that it's adding is considered to be detrimental, then according to Rabbi Yochanan, it's not truma. Now, what the Brisa is currently trying to determine is in a case where originally it was beneficial because there was only the starter, the sa'ar of truma, and then later on the sa'ar of not truma was also added on, and it made it at that point detrimental by adding together both of the sa'ars. So that's what we're questioning. So the truma is definitely the issue here. The question is whether it gets the status of, we're looking at truma like something that asas it for non-kahanim.
Right.
And the question is, was it a nice and tam lefgam or not, in a case where originally it was beneficial and later on it became detrimental?
So the question is, does it become non-truma when additional starter is added?
Right, when additional starter is added, so it makes the taste the tam that came from the truma, by adding to this extra tam of the heter, together, both of them together are too much. They overwhelm the dough and it ruins the dough. It's no longer edible because it has too much starter. So the question is that considered that because the beginning was beneficial, does it have a din truma, or does it lose the din truma because eventually that tam became detrimental, became pagam? The Gemara says, so you see from here a raya that they are actually arguing that Reb Meir is going to say, even when we've just proven that this last case of the beans can't be talking about where it's at the beginning mashviach and then at the end was pagam, because that was we saw in the earlier case that everyone says that it's aser. So it must be over here we're saying that even when it's pagam mitchila, Reb Meir is saying it's aser. Shmamina. What do we need all three cases that we said in the Brisa? Like we just came to the conclusion. It's coming to tell you that even where it's a pagam from the beginning, it's a machlekes. And like we just said, the earlier case where it was first, you first put in the truma and then afterwards the chulin, we're coming to tell you that even though at the beginning it was a benefit and then it was a pagam, everyone will say it's aser. Even Rav Shimon will say in that case that it's aser. Elareisha lamali, the case where you put in two things at the same time. you put in the truma together with the chulin, and each of them had enough to be machmitz. Hashtu masei v'loy kamashbiach klal. Aser abanan reisha to kamashbiach mibayalei. If in the sefer where it was where you just all you did was put in the yayin into the adoshim, and it was immediately hot, so it was totally pagam. And nevertheless, Rameir says it's also reisha to mashbiach mibaya, and there's reisha where at least at the beginning for the first hour until it rises, it's mashbiach. Then later on, it's too much chaymet, so it will eventually go bad. But it can only be better than the case where it was pagam from the beginning, where you have mixed pagam and where you overdid it, and it's going to eventually go bad. No, the reason why we have the Reisha is to tell you that even Rav Shimon will say in that case that it's also.
Mutter. It's mutter or also?
It's also. Right? We said that the Reisha, we had both of them together, right? Didn't we say it's also?
Because Rashi says
no, that's not the case.
According to Rashi said Lashmina de Rav Shimon Matir.
Tashma. So Arshal Truma v'Shachos Navlo Toicha Isa Bezek De'Lag so Chem Tzoi Aser. Rav Shimon Mater. I'm sorry, right? Rav Shimon is Mater in that case. We're saying the Chiddush that Rav Shimon is Mater even in this case, even though there is some element of pagam. You're right. Rabbi Rachel of Shimon Itzrich. We have to say that Rav Shimon is matter even in the Rachel. V'achi kamrei l'Rabban Rav Shimon. Isa zuru yu lahachat v'shtei sayis. Mi garim lo shetachn b'sho achas iser. The Chachamim Rameir, who says it's aser, says that it's what's causing it to be machmitz? It's the iser, right? It's going if you just would have put in the chulin, it would become chametz in 2 hours, and now it's becoming chametz in 1 hour. It's becoming it's rising in 1 hour. So the iser is being gair. Rav Shimon Rav Shimon disagrees. Rav Shimon says they're both doing it together. So that means that Rameir would say to Rav Shimon, you should be maskim in the case of where it's hishbiach v'achach aser, where it was hishbiach v'achach hagam, which is case of the bread, where you put both the iser and the heter in at the beginning. That at the beginning, for the first hour, both of them were working in concert to make it good. But then it keeps rising and it gets ruined. So it should be a case of hishbiach l'seif pagam, which Rav Shimon was maskim is aser. And Rav Shimon said no. He says no. At the beginning, both of them were being mashgiach. It's not that it was first mashgiach and then that the chametz, the chulin was the iser was hishbiach, and then after, when it was hishbiach, both of them were mashbiach. Shepaglu sheim paglu. What does that mean? He's saying that since it was only the hishbiach was not only from the iser, it was also from the heter. So he says it's really like it's pagum from the beginning. Since the heter was not being done or totally by the iser part, it was also by the other part. So that it's like a case of where it was pagum from the beginning, which Rav Shimon says is mutter. So tomorrow, Rav Shimon, let's start heter v'isa b'hada adadi v'litzer. Why don't we say that you put the two of them together? Why does he say it never became aser in the beginning? Why doesn't he say that? Because he says, Taka, that when you put them both together at the same time, they're mutter. Why doesn't he say when at the beginning for the first hour, like we were suggesting from the beginning, after the first hour, they were mitzdarf together to be mater. And according to him, that is mutter, that is asur. Rav Shimon generally holds that you can't have two isurim to be mitzdarf. It's not an arla klaya kerem mitzdarf. And if you have a amount of arla and a klaya kerem, that each one of them is not enough, but you put them together, and together they're enough to cause to make enough to be a tam of iser. Rav Shimon says they're not mitzdarf. Okay, we're gonna have to stop over here. It's getting quite late. It's time for the davening.
All right.
Yes,
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
That was